Smurfs 2 is a sequel that I don't think anyone really saw coming. It was released 2 years after the original, which seems a little quick for a movie with such extensive special effects. Of course, there's nothing really too special about the effects in the first one, so why would things be different this time around? It was directed again by Raja Gosnell, and it brings back most of the previous cast. The same sets are used, it's almost the same kind of story. You'd really have to convince me that this wasn't made at the same time as the first one. It's almost like they shot enough footage to make up 2 movies, and when the first one was successful, they thought, well, we have enough deleted scenes, might as well make a second one. And so they did, and it wasn't as successful as the 2011 movie, but it still made way too much money for me to ignore it. I also can't ignore it because I was requested to watch it by Ryan on Patreon. Going through all the Sony animated features, I've been surprised by all the highs and lows. Some of them turn out better than I could have ever imagined, and others don't end up being as bad as speculated. The first Smurfs was just boring, and the premise seemed pretty tired and overdone, but it never got to the point of annoyance. I watched it, I liked that it was set in New York because New York is pretty, and it left most of the potty humor at home. This time around, it's a lot the same, just a boring story, not much really interesting going on. There's a funny line here and there, but mostly I'm just flabbergasted that this is the best they could come up with. Live action Smurfs end up being in the real world through a magical portal. That's really no fun. Neil Patrick Harris is still the same. Him and Jayma Mays give fine performances. He's still a dick at times though, even more so than the first movie because we're introduced to his stepfather, played by Brendan Gleeson, a character he treats poorly throughout most of the feature, despite the fact that the stepfather is quite lovely. I guess it's supposed to be a character building moment, but it comes off as underwritten and mean-spirited. There's a point where Brendan Gleeson turns into a duck, and that actually manages to make me laugh. It's just such a strange idea to bring up in a movie about the Smurfs. We didn't really need a talking duck too, but it's funny. Until he transforms back, which ends up ruining the entire joke, since he ends up goofily landing in a laundry basket on the sidewalk. It really throws off any of the fun I was having with it earlier. Papa Smurf is still played by Jonathan Winters, which ends up being his final role. Kind of a bad note to end on, but he still delivers an excellent calming performance that he always did. The only issue I have is that they push his memorial too deep into credits. It should have been right as the movie ended, but that's a non-issue. At least they paid some kind of tribute to him. You're probably wondering why I haven't talked about the Smurf story, but that's because I don't really know what the story is this time around. Smurfette was transformed by Papa Smurf from a naughty to a traditional blue being, which I think can be interpreted as some sort of creepy racism, with the whole racial transformation, if you want to look at it that way. But don't worry, there's 2 scenes where the entire village of men surround the girls and catcall them, which is awkward. Papa just happens to have stones this time around, which can bring them to the city, unlike the first movie where it was just some random portal. Kind of makes you wonder why they felt so strongly about taking this route again that they had to come up with a stupid explanation like that. Eventually, they'd make a 3rd movie, but it was out of continuity and was fully animated. No live action or Neil Patrick Harris to be found. I haven't seen it, but it already looks a lot more appealing than these CGI creations. It's not really the fault of anyone, the blue coloring just never matches well with the scenery, and the eyes just bug me. There's just way too much Smurfing blue. There's a flying scene as well, which, after seeing things like How to Train Your Dragon, Avatar, and so many movies involving aeronautics, we finally have an example of a bad flying scene. Gargamel is back, and he's apparently a famous magician in the real world, which is kind of funny. And unless I'm smurfing and singing, I think Azrael looks a lot better this time around. For as much as this movie looks kind of ugly, the animation is still done fine enough. I'm not really sure why they decided to get rid of Brainy Smurf though and swap them for Vanity Smurf. Maybe it's easier to animate, or maybe it was to use more John Oliver, which you can't ever complain about more John Oliver. But that also means we get less of Anton Yelchin. It's kind of weird, he was a main character in the first movie, but this time around it seems like he's barely there. Smurfette gets kidnapped and manipulated by Gargamel, but only to a point, and she spends some time with the Naughties, which are the Smurf-like creations of Gargamel's, and it's just scene after scene of garbage. It's just boring. Nothing happens. It's like fast food for children. They won't get much out of it. It's probably not the best thing for them, but they get some colorful toys out of it. I guess I just don't see the point of basically remaking the first movie. Come on, let's explore the Smurf village. Let's see some more goofy or creative animation. I don't need to see Smurf butts or 1/5 of How I Met Your Mother. It's not offensive or Smurf awful. It's just forgettable.